Welcome back to World History. You guys may have noticed I've added a couple videos on to the playlist that I found online. One of them was one of the speeches that Winston Churchill gave to rally the people when they were dealing with the Battle of Britain, dealing with the Luftwaffe, this was their finest hour speech. I just wanted you guys to be able to hear what he sounded like when he spoke and communicated and rallied the people to fight back. Also, I put in another video of some actual footage of what it looked like at Pearl Harbor. That is like the next day or so of Pearl Harbor after the Japanese had bombed it. And I just wanted you guys to see the video, the footage, just also see how Americans were reacting to it. That is called a newsreel that you're listening to for that video. And it kind of gave the news because people didn't have television back then, but it also definitely promoted the propaganda that was involved as well. So, also, I forgot to mention one thing at the end of the video. I was so excited with moving on that I forgot to assign your homework. Don't worry, you'll still be turning it in at the same time anyways, but it's pages 203 and 204 in your activities book. That homework is entitled A Prisoner of War. I want you to do the reading and then answer the 4 questions on the back. So 203, 204. Supposed to have been assigned yesterday or in the last video, but I forgot, so I'm assigning it now. It's still due when you turn in your packets. So let's get back into this. We're talking about the Allies now as they start turning the war back into a victory for the Allies. From Britain to Normandy. Number 1, Allied Summit Conferences. 2 key conferences were held among the Allies in 1943 that would help influence the outcome of the war. Letter A, the first conference was held at Casablanca, which, by the way, for you geography students out there, remember is in Morocco. It declared that nothing less than unconditional surrender of the Axis would be acceptable. The reason for such a declaration was that after World War I, many Germans began to believe the myth that they had not really been defeated. Churchill and Roosevelt wanted to make sure that this time Germany would know that it had been beaten. Another conference was held in Tehran, which is in modern-day Iran. And for the first time, the Big Three, as they were called, met to discuss what to do, as they turned the war around. For the first time, the Big Three met together. The Big Three included Churchill, which you see on your left, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, pictured in the middle, and Joseph Stalin on the right. Churchill wanted to concentrate their military efforts in the Mediterranean and Eastern Europe in order to prevent the Soviets from gaining an influence there. Stalin, who wanted to control Eastern Europe, opposed the idea and favored the Allies opening another front in France. Roosevelt, hoping to get Russia to help in the war against Japan, will support Stalin. The result of the Tehran Conference was that they agreed to an invasion of France, of course, as far Western Europe as you could pretty much get. Number 2, the Normandy Invasion. We've talked about different operation names, and this one is called Operation Overlord. The U.S. and British plan to invade France. That's what the operation was. First of all, the Allies misled the Germans as to the time and place of the invasion. Obviously, it would be impossible to cover up the massive stockpiling of troops and war materials, so the Allies built fake military installations that included rows of dummy tanks that appeared real to German airships flying overhead. The military then created a non-existent invasion force complete with its own commander, sent false messages which they allowed the Germans to intercept, and even conducted naval movements off that section of the French coast. All this was intended to make the Germans believe that an attack was coming near the French-Belgian border. The bluff, or the mislead, succeeded. When the invasion did take place, Germany's best troops were stationed in the wrong place of France, where they thought the invasion was going to take place. On June 6th, 1944, on a very testable date, D-Day occurred. The D-Day Allied attack on Normandy. And in military terms, by the way, D-Day means the day when an attack is to be launched. The reason why we remember this D-Day is because it's the D-Day. It's the most famous day in which an attack occurred ever. D-Day proved to be the greatest amphibious operation in history. Over 10,000 planes bombed coastal targets and provided aerial cover for the invasion forces. Ships followed minesweepers to their designated spots. The Allies landed at 5 beaches and managed to secure all of them. Paratroopers landed behind German lines and secured important objectives. A little more information about this. Within 3 weeks of the invasion, After the initial success of the landing in Normandy, the Allies were unable to advance rapidly. The Norman countryside was like a checkerboard of fields edged by hedgerows. Because much of the land was low, it was also crisscrossed by numerous drainage ditches. Heavy rains had flooded many of the fields. The Germans initially used this to their advantage. The advancing Allies had used the roads because tanks often could not get through the fields. Infantry crossing open fields were exposed to fire from Germans hidden in the hedgerows. To solve this problem, General Omar Bradley devised Operation Cobra, in which Allied bombers concentrated on one section of the German defenses. After the bombing, Allied troops swept through the broken German line, forcing the Germans into a pocket. By the end of July, Operation Cobra had proved successful. So many Germans surrendered that Allied commanders ordered soldiers to send them to the rear, disarmed without guard. By August 21st, the rest of the German army in Normandy was encircled. 10,000 were killed and 50,000 were captured. Despite the breakthrough and the advances they had made, the Allies were not eager to march on Paris. They planned to leave Paris and chase the Germans out of the rest of France. However, a communist uprising in Paris led de Gaulle to urge an attack on Paris. The Allies agreed only when it became evident that if they did not, the Germans would destroy Paris. Hitler had ordered General Cholstitz, commander in Paris, to destroy the city. Cholstitz saw no advantage in destroying it. He did not want history to remember him that way. However, he used the threat of destruction to stop the uprising. But the communists would not back down. Then General Eisenhower ordered a French division, supported by Americans, to march on Paris. The city fell to the French with very little fighting. De Gaulle was quickly installed as the leader of liberated France. Within 3 weeks of the invasion, the Allies had landed nearly 1 million men and hundreds of thousands of vehicles and war supplies. Germany's defeat was assured. It was only a matter of time before it was forced to surrender. So, question might be asked, why did the Germans continue fighting for a whole nother year? By the way, parallel that to the notes you see here. Why did the Germans fight for a whole nother year? Well, one reason was the belief in new miracle weapons, quote unquote, to save Germany. In 1944, the Nazis began launching rocket bombs called V-1 and then V-2, which were more powerful than any rockets ever shot before. German scientists had also been working on developing the atomic bomb. Imagine what would have happened had they beat the U.S. in constructing an atomic bomb. Letter B. He hoped that the U.S. and Britain would break their alliance with Russia. Hitler did not believe that the Western democracies would allow the Soviet Union to conquer Germany. Letter C, a third reason was Nazis stirred up a fear of Russian communism among the German people. Nazi program began to emphasize the importance of Fortress Europe instead of Lebensraum, with the cry of victory or Bolshevism ringing in their ears. Many Germans wearily tried to do their part in salvaging the collapsing Third Reich. Letter C, from island to island. Let's talk about quickly what things were looking like in the Pacific. The fall of the Philippines. We're going back a couple years now to when the Axis powers were really on the move. And after Pearl Harbor, Japan rapidly attacked other islands in the South Pacific. The U.S. still owned the Philippines, and it found itself undermanned. Although the Americans fought on for several months, in the end they were forced to surrender, and all organized resistance in the Philippines ceased. Douglas MacArthur was in charge of U.S. forces on the Philippines, and what you need to know about him is that he was placed in charge of U.S. forces in the Pacific. He had been stationed in the Philippines in order to flee to avoid being captured, and he made his famous promise to the Filipinos, "I shall return." Japan conquered other locations as well: Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, Burma, the Dutch East Indies, and more. Because other nations were unprepared for war, Japan won a series of relatively easy victories. If you look in your books at page 503, it shows you a map of World War II in the Pacific. And you can see how much territory Japan was able to take. Also, you'll see where the Americans are going to fight back. Japan overestimated itself as its resources were no match for America's industrial potential. By the end of 1942, most of the ships that had been damaged at Pearl Harbor were repaired or replaced, and under the leadership of MacArthur, the tide turned against Japan. Think of Japan as a rubber band expanding as you stretch it out, but at some point you stretch it out too far, it's going to snap, and that's exactly what's about to happen. Number 2, Islandhopping Campaign. In 1942, the U.S. defeated Japan in 2 major naval battles. The first one was the Battle of the Coral Sea. If you look in your maps, if you see where the Coral Sea is, just off the coast of Australia, so you can see where we are talking about. In the battle, the U.S. sank 100,000 tons of Japanese shipping and prevented Japan from launching a planned invasion of Australia. A little bit more information about the Battle of the Coral Sea. The Battle of the Coral Sea was the first naval battle in history in which the ships involved never saw each other. All of the damage was done by aircraft. The Japanese had a clear 10-3 advantage in aircraft carriers. They thought that if they could destroy the U.S. carriers, the U.S. would withdraw from the war. They set out to capture Port Moresby, New Guinea. Because the U.S. had intercepted Japanese communications, however, U.S. forces were able to anticipate Japanese moves. Although the fighting was fierce, Japan's lack of radar saved the day for the U.S. The Japanese lost 1 carrier and most of their aircraft. The U.S. also lost a carrier, and another, the USS Yorktown, was badly damaged. The battle ended in a draw, but it saved the sea lanes to Australia from Japanese control. Soon after the Battle of the Coral Sea, the Battle of Guadalcanal began. There the Marines perfected the landing techniques that were to prove so effective during the rest of the war. After 6 months of fighting, U.S. forces secured the area. Guadalcanal was the first U.S. land victory of the war with Japan and marked the limit of Japanese territorial expansion. So, please make sure that you remember to do the homework that I assigned at the beginning of the video. That's all the time that we have for today. Hope you all have a good rest of the day. Be good, do good.